Hi everybody, so today we're going to be looking at creating nighttime scenes using mixed media. Now I'm going to be honest and say I do not do nighttime scenes very often. These are from a year ago when we were looking at creating atmospheric scenes, and I really loved that month and this live drawing session. And for me, I find nighttime scenes quite intimidating, and I think a lot of you feel the same. And for me, I think it's kind of a technical issue because we're working with paper that's white. So to create a convincing nighttime scene, we're going to have to put a lot of dark colour on the paper. And that could be ink or watercolour or gouache. But there's this kind of fear that if we put a lot on, we can't take it away. So we might accidentally paint over something that was meant to be white. It could all feel too dark, or even just feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm squeezing so much paint out of the tube. What if this looks horrible and I've wasted half a tube of paint? So there's all these things that can come up with actually committing. I think that's what it is, it's the commitment. You know, if you're doing something that's kind of light and bright and fresh, you can gradually build up layer upon layer of delicate colour. Whereas to paint a nighttime scene, I think you have to commit. You have to put some serious dark tones on the page. It doesn't have to all be dark. Nighttime scenes are really all about contrast. But yeah, you have to commit. And yeah, then there's all the technical issues of putting in details and highlights. So you want kind of light on dark. You want some lighter details on top of the darkness. What are you going to use? There's so many options. So I've got some things that I'm going to be using in this session in front of me. So you can work opaque onto the dark. So things like Neocolor are great because they're really opaque. We've got coloured pencils. I've got a Posca pen, which is really opaque. That's white. I've got pan pastels, which are great for a kind of diffuse glow. And then you can also kind of create a resist. So before you do your dark background, you can create a resist. So I've got some masking fluid, and I've got like a candle here, just a wax candle. So there's so many different methods to try, and we also have just painting with white gouache as well over the top. So many different methods that we can use to create contrast and that sense of light and dark. And then there's also the issue of colours of light, how people look in the darkness. If they're standing under a orange street light, are they going to look slightly orange, slightly yellow, or maybe they're next to some neon lights and it's going to cast these strange colours across them and strange shadows. So there's kind of so many different things to think about with nighttime scenes. But my aim with this session is that by the end of it, we will have a whole toolkit of brilliant mixed media techniques to help us tackle nighttime scenes, and we will go away feeling much more confident and much more capable. Because I don't know about you, but I look at a nighttime scene, and for some reason they're always so complicated. I look at them and think, I don't even know where to start. So my aim is to change that feeling by the end of this session. So the very first thing we're going to do is prep some paper. So we're going to start with the background and look at different ways we can put dark tones on the paper. What kind of dark tones? Do we want black? Do we want blue? How do we put it on the paper? And just start with some primed backgrounds, which I think kind of takes away some of the fear and gives us lots of lovely backgrounds to work with and play with. So the paper I'm using today is Winsor & Newton's mixed media paper. So very, very similar to my go-to cartridge paper from Art. So I use this one a lot, but this one's just a tiny bit thicker, which I think will be good for carrying these kind of heavy washes of paint and ink. So yeah, it's just a little bit thicker, and I love this paper because it's got a very subtle texture. It's not as smooth as a smooth watercolour paper, as like a hot press, but it's not as textured as a cold press. It's kind of in between. It's a lovely subtle texture. It's a nice bright white, and it's quite a good heavy weight. And I think you can buy this internationally. And it's a great paper for practicing and doing experiments, I feel like if you're using expensive watercolour paper, it can start to make you feel a little bit more precious, whereas this is really affordable, so it's great for experimenting. So I've got a few that I did earlier just to kind of test out some different techniques, and I'm going to show you kind of how I did those and talk about some different techniques. So one of the first things with creating backgrounds is, do we want a black background or do we want a blue or maybe a more multi-tonal background? So I'm going to try a few different ones and we can play around with them and see. So for the black, I've got Winsor & Newton's Black Indian ink. Catching that on my sleeves. I'm not wearing a very practical jumper today. And then I'm going to go for a really nice big brush. So this is the Quill brush from Pro Art and Omar Wynn, the size 4, and it's perfect for doing big loose backgrounds. So I'm going to saturate it in water first and then pick up a bit of ink and just kind of start painting that on. Just want to cover about half the page, just a loose rectangle. And I'm going to add a bit more water to this side. So we get maybe a bit of a sense of, maybe it's lighter over here, a bit of a directionality to the light. But we get a really nice coverage, nice and inky, lots we can do with that, kind of on top of that. And to compare, I'm going to do a more kind of blue toned one using a chromatic grey. So I've got my paint palette here. I might just squeeze these straight out because I'm going to need quite a lot. So ultramarine is kind of our base. And then a little bit of flame red and a little bit of permanent yellow deep. And we just mix all of those together and you get a lovely deep dark colour. So you can see that it's kind of more bluey toned. And some of the colours might separate out a bit as it dries, especially if I use lots of water. I might leave a little bit of white space on this one for the moon, so I'm going to paint that in first. It's a really, really wonky moon. There we go. And then just paint around it while it's all still wet. And working with a wet brush just to spread what's already there, so it's going to be kind of lighter at the top around the moon. And you can see already how the colours are kind of starting to separate and pool and give us a bit of atmosphere. Almost looks like we've got kind of like maybe dark clouds. I might put some clouds in. I don't want them to look too perfect, too kind of forced. Just try to keep it natural. Well, we'll see how that looks when it dries. One thing it's a good idea to do once you have your prepped paper like this is just to test out your materials on them and see how they look on this dark background and see what you like. So you can just see how they look light, how they look kind of pressing harder. Look at kind of using them in different ways, so on the side, like that. And just have a look at some different materials and some different techniques. So using a brush to apply, or we could use like a powder puff. Which gives a slightly different look. It's good for kind of a soft diffuse kind of, if you had like something misty or smoke or something, be quite nice. We've got the Posca pen. The paint does stop flowing if you stop using them for a while, so you have to give it another shake. There you go. See how this looks kind of on the side, directly up. It's quite nice actually. It's a much nicer line than using like a gel pen or something. I am liking this. Just see what different kind of effects you can get, and how does this look if we fill in a bigger area. You know, if we were putting in some details like a window like that, would that work? Or putting in a moon. And then white pencils, which I feel like they're always the thing that kind of let me down. They're never as dark as I want them to be. Showing up quite well on that. I feel like for this pencil to show up, it needs to be on a really dark background. But just doing a kind of a test swatch like this and playing around with what opaque materials you've got and seeing how they look on a dark background is a great way to get started. So while I'm waiting for the masking fluid to dry, let's have a go having a play with mixed media and seeing what effects we can create with some of the pages that I prepped earlier. It's a tiny little blob of masking fluid there, which I'm just going to get rid of. Okay, so I've got these two backgrounds that I prepped and I've left a little bit of white space. So in my head, I haven't sketched it, but I'm kind of imagining that this one is going to be, I've got the moon and a house maybe in the woods, and there's one light on. So I'm just going to kind of sketch now. I think maybe the house is here. So maybe kind of sketching the house and then putting in trees. And then thinking what we're going to add to the scene in terms of lighter and darker and what mixed media we can use. So lighter, I think we want some nice warm glow from the window and maybe kind of on the floor as well. And then darker would be the house and the trees, and maybe we're going to put some stars in. So I'm going to try the Posca pen for some stars because I haven't used that before. Okay, so that's really nice. This is a fine nib, so this is the 0.7mm, and it's nice, you can kind of vary the size. So I've used white gel pens before and haven't really liked it because of the rollerball, and I find something like a white pencil, they're just never opaque enough. So I mean, you can hardly see that. But that is showing up nicely, I think, for stars in the sky. And you can kind of dot it and do it quite randomly, which is really nice. And it's just a little bit more controlled than a Neo Colour Pastel, which is great, and you can sharpen it quite fine, but I don't think it's quite as opaque. So this is really nice for stars. Okay, for house and trees, I'm thinking we use more of the kind of same colours but a bit darker, so using that chromatic grey that I mixed up at the beginning. So I'll start painting a tree and we'll kind of see how we go. The trees, I always try and keep them looking natural and not too perfect, especially when I'm making them up from my head. I think it's very easy to make trees kind of look very perfect when you're making them up from your head. They kind of look too balanced, too perfect. So trying to hold the brush loosely and make it look quite natural. So we've got that kind of contrast now. We've got mid-tone, we've got light, and we've got that darker tone. And then I'm going to put a bit of the house in. So I've watered it down a bit more, so it's not quite as dark as the trees. I'm just kind of layering it over the top. And this probably isn't really what a real house looks like. This is just demonstrating techniques, just having a bit of a play really. And we'll have another tree over the top of this, so the tree needs to be able to be darker to show up against this. And then when this is dry, I can put some pan pastels on and kind of create that glow. And just think about other details. I'm just going to put in some window panes. You can kind of have some darker details on here. I'm going to start to paint this tree. I know this isn't completely dry, but I don't want it to take too long. I think it'll be okay. Okay, so we've got another tree there, and then when that's a little bit more dry, I can start to think about putting in a bit of glow. I can probably do that now on the ground, so I'm going to use pan pastels. I've got yellow here, and this is kind of, it's called raw umber tint, but it's kind of like a stone colour. So I could do that very, very gently with a brush. Which gives us a really nice kind of subtle glow from the window. And we could put a bit of yellow in The yellow isn't as opaque as the white, so I'm putting the white with stone colour on first. Is this dry enough to be able to do? So the yellow is a bit more transparent, which is quite good then for being able to layer over stuff like this. So we've got kind of a warm glow coming from inside. It's kind of then coming out here. And we can kind of keep going with more details. You know, we can pick out little bits of grass, we can pick out texture on the house. So thinking lighter and darker. We've got a mid-tone, we're going to add some darker, we're going to add some lighter. I really like this this Posca pen. I think that's really nice. I almost feel like, because my brain is still kind of in Christmas mode, there's part of me that almost feels like you could do Christmas lights around it. That would be quite nice. I might try that when it's more dry. Just put in some Christmas lights and then put a little bit of glow in with pan pastels. I think could be really fun. There we go. I think if we kind of go over where a tree branch is, I can just go back over the tree branch, just kind of redefine it. Okay, not brilliantly done, but we have some little Christmas lights. So when that's dry, I can add some more glow, and I'm just thinking about adding kind of a bit more glow here as well. Just kind of boosting that a little bit, and then thinking if we have the glow from the lights, would we have a little bit on the trees, and it all just kind of starts to come to life a bit more, doesn't it? And you can kind of see the trees against the house a bit more. And I've got the white, I can always put a bit more glow around the moon as well. I can see now the perspective on this window is completely off because that line is there and that is there, but this is just a demonstration, it's just an exercise. I kind of did the window first and then did the house later, so it doesn't 100% work, but never mind. Okay, those are dry. So then the fun is doing the lights, and do I want to do them with neo colour pastels or do I want to do them with pan pastels? That is the question. Might try one of each and see how it looks. That is really nice and glowy. I think I've made my decision. I think it's going to be pan pastels, so it's just seeing what colours I've got. So definitely red, yellow, pink. I've got this green, which is kind of hideous. It obviously didn't really look like this online when I bought it. It is called bright yellow green. I also have this one, which is phthalo green. Was it that? I don't know. I can't pronounce it. Let's just start with these and see how we get on. I feel like blue isn't going to really show up. I'm going to try the green. That's quite nice. I might kind of do this in batches just to save a bit of time. And last one, the green. Okay, I like that. I feel it looks really, really magical and it's got a nice glow. I think I just need to re-establish that the tree is in the foreground. But that is very easily done. So I'm just going back over those branches. And I think that's got a lovely kind of magical Christmassy glow now. So we've got another page here that I prepped earlier, and this one with a kind of very loose wash of gouache. You could also use watercolours. And I thought, how about creating that kind of glow first and then putting the dark in on top. So I'm just going to sketch a street lamp, kind of an old-fashioned street lamp. And maybe a person. Got a reference image there. Someone looking at their phone as usual, but maybe she's checking her map, seeing where to go next. I find with nighttime images, I can never find exactly what I want in terms of a reference image. So I think it's best to kind of just put things together and make things up, because I've been looking and looking and I can't find any reference images that I kind of 100% love. So I think it's good just to put things together. But this is useful for like the girl, the light. Maybe there's a little, like a window up here. I like that window detail with the balcony up there. And there's more windows this way. And there's some steps here. Okay, so I've got a sketch on top of this background, and then I'm going to work on top. So thinking what needs to be darkest. So we've got I'm thinking layers. I'm thinking what to go for first. I'm going to put the dark in first, and then maybe put a mid-tone in around, trying to preserve some of the glow. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to go. I'm very much just experimenting with this. So I've got that window. And the balcony, which I'll put in a second. And then starting to think about putting in some more mid-tones, more kind of backgroundy colours. Just going to put in a bit of this window here. So we've got a more watered down chromatic grey mix, which I'm going to use over the top of this. So we're still going to see some of the orange through. And it's also about kind of leaving little bits, well, it would be leaving bits of the white paper, but in this case it's leaving bits of the orange paper. And then thinking about, if we've got the glow of this light here, not kind of getting too close to it. I feel like just use a clean wet brush to just blend that round there. I'm doing this with very watered down gouache, but you could just as easily be using watercolours. Watercolours would be great for this. And just kind of working slowly, because once you put the dark colour on, it's very hard to take off and have that kind of bright freshness again, have that kind of glow. So just kind of thinking about where it would be. Kind of looking into this window, we can see a sort of shadow inside the building. Same with this one, there's a lot of shadows inside the building. And I'm going to work my way in, kind of leaving a circle here. And then using a clean wet brush to blend. And I'm doing all this with my size 4 filbert brush from my range with Pro Art. And then I can gradually add more, a little bit more. I'm just kind of blending it wet on wet a bit. And then from there we can add more depth, more kind of dark details, more light if we need it, some highlights on the lady. But already it's starting to feel very kind of an atmospheric, glowy street scene, which I really like. So coming back to this one that is now dry, I can put in some more detail, so I can put in some details on this balcony. And I've got a kind of a thicker mixture of paint here, so it's allowing us to have even more depth, have an even darker tone. Put some detail on the lamp maybe. We can play around with putting in other details and looking at mixed media. So there's some steps here. I'm not sure if I like the black pencil on here. I've got this one called Greyish Black. I don't know if this is going to be better for details. Yeah, I feel like that's more harmonious, that kind of bluey grey rather than pure black. Just playing around with kind of adding more detail. And then I can add in more, layer up more of the chromatic grey as well. Just add kind of delicate layers of that. So it's kind of another window here, but the light isn't on. I don't want to get into too many details, just kind of roughly hinting at things inside the windows. Maybe need just a bit more darkness on this side of the image. And I was thinking about things like putting in cobblestones maybe. And that looks really nice on that colour. Maybe picking out a little bit of the colour, maybe on her. Again, trying to use sort of sympathetic colours, so rather than going in with black and white, which I tried and didn't look right, going in for this, it's called Greyish Black, it's a very bluey dark grey, and then this is Apricot, and that looks really nice for kind of adding more glow, adding more details. I'm just putting in a little bit of glow around the street lamp, and again it could be great for putting in details on the street lamp. And this colour is Sahara Yellow, which is another nice one for kind of putting in a bit of glow and having that balance of light and dark, and having your kind of your mid-tones, your dark tones, and then bringing light and warmth as well, so you've got that contrast. But another way to prep them would be to use masking fluid. So I've got a couple of pages that I've prepared, I've sketched already. I'm going to show you the images on the screen so you can see what I've sketched. So when it's a very simple shape like a moon or a window, it's very easy just to leave that space and paint around it. When it is more complicated, it's writing or something like this, it makes sense to use something like masking fluid, which will give you much more control in terms of preserving that white area and then being able to paint over it. So my masking fluid of choice is the Sminker one, and it comes in pots and little bottles like this, so you can use it directly from the bottle, which is really good for doing kind of little dots. So I can just dot it on everywhere that I don't want the dark colour to be, so all the little lights, I can just dot it on like that. There is a slight issue of controlling the size of the dots, but it's working pretty well for little dots, and there's a few here as well I need to do. And then for the writing, I'm going to use a brush. So I've put some, this is just an old pan pastel lid, but I've put some here. I'm going to pre-wet my brush before I pick it up, and just make sure you're using kind of an old brush, a brush you don't really use very often. And I'm using separate painting water for this because I don't want it kind of getting on my good brushes. So I'm just going to paint this. And once this is painted and we've taken the masking fluid off, I can erase these pencil lines. So I'm just going over them. And I could do this with the pen, but I find you don't have as much control and it doesn't have a painterly line. I like having the painterly line and being able to control the masking fluid a bit more. So that's done, and then we've got kind of lights all around here, and then I didn't like the text that was on this one, so I've just kind of put now showing because I think it's probably a cinema. So have I done this too small? We will see. Quite a slow process because you need to get more masking fluid for every brush stroke. Okay, and obviously there is going to be other tone on this. There's light in the windows, this building's kind of lit up red, but they're big block shapes that it'll be easy for me to just paint around when I add the wash over, whereas these are quite fiddly, so it's easier just to have them kind of blanked out. And then our next image is this one. I loved this one, it's so magical. I'm going to simplify it because there's a lot going on. And just focus on this kind of popcorn cart at night time. So I thought that masking fluid would be great for doing these stripes on the popcorn cart. So with something like this, you want to sketch first and then just fill in everything that is going to be white or is going to be a lighter tone. And it should mean the cart itself stands out nicely. We've got these white bits here. And there's all these kind of fairy lights at the top as well, which are so pretty. I'm going to write in popcorn. I'm a bit limited now because I can't put my hand on this wet masking fluid. kind of run out of space there. And then we've got the stripes of the barrel. I'm going to move it all over a bit. Do the popcorn, and then we've got these lights which are really lovely. Hopefully this will read as fairy lights or just as kind of some kind of sparkling magical light, we'll see. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I don't think I'm going to put masking fluid on the girl. I think I can just paint around her. But those pages are now prepped. So now I'm going to come back to these ones which are dry. So I'm going to start with this one. So looking at the colours, we've got some really dark, almost kind of pure black in the background and on the signs, and then we've got this red glow on the building, red and yellow. So that's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to do the background, I think, first and kind of get the shape of the cinema. We need to mix up some more of this chromatic grey. So I'm going to do this bit on the sign, and I can just paint straight over the masking fluid without worrying about kind of leaving space. And I want to paint over this text here in this kind of darkest, this will be the darkest tone I use in the image. And then need to do the sky. So I've got a larger filbert brush for the night sky. We've got this lovely kind of, I think it's Art Deco detailing on the cinema. I'm just kind of ignoring my own pencil lines and just freehanding it with a brush. I've just done the sky just a fraction darker than the sign. And I'm just going to let that dry for now. So this one I'm going to put some colour on. So we're going to need red and then a kind of a dark backgroundy colour. So I think I'm going to do the red first, get that on, and then work around it. And I can just paint straight over these lines, so I'm just going to paint quite loosely. And it does make it really easy to paint all these red details, knowing I can just go straight over anything that needs to be white. Oh yeah, there's a bit there on the sign. Okay. I think that will do, and then I'm going to paint the rest much looser. So I'm going to use this big quill brush. And kind of think about tone. So the sky is quite dark, and then the ground is a little bit lighter. And this is kind of getting lighter as I work my way down anyway, because I've got less paint on the brush. So I'm just leaving white space for the girl. And then I'm going to go in with a smaller brush while it's all still wet and just fill in some little details. So just bring this right up. I'm doing this all quite quickly because this is for a demo video, so the red is still wet in places. If the red was completely dry, it would be a little bit easier. But it is so nice to just be able to paint straight over that and not be fiddling around with painting individual bits of popcorn. And then I'm going to put a bit of shadow under here. and then it's got quite a definite shadow here, so I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to put the wheels in later when it's dry. And then we've got her shadow there. Okay, I'm going to let that dry before I do any more to it, I think. So coming back to these two now, I'm going to add some more details on here. So the building has got this kind of reddy glow, and I've got the windows as well. I think I might do windows first with a more watered down chromatic grey. So putting in some shadow, and then just kind of little individual rectangles for the panes. One thing I do find is if you've got masking fluid on the paper, your hand won't slide across the paper as easy as you're used to. And then I'm going to paint this one, so we've got a much lighter tone. Kind of working around those little blobs of masking fluid. Thinking about tones and thinking about simplifying. Just because it's a nighttime scene, there's no need to necessarily complicate things. I'm going to put some shadows in now, and then I'm going to add a kind of yellowy glow to this afterwards. And I'm just doing this really, really roughly. I'll start with the red. And I think I'll use some pan pastels as well to kind of add to the glow. And then it's kind of joined by some yellow down here. And I think I'm going to go right over these windows if they're dried enough. Just picking up a little bit of excess. And once this is dry, I'll add more of this transparent layer of colour once everything's dry. I did this on my thinner cartridge paper, which I am regretting, but I think it'll kind of straighten out a bit once it's all dry. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, come over to this one. So I think I'm going to remove the masking fluid at this point, which is always a bit nerve-wracking. You can kind of just rub it off with a clean finger like that, or you can use an eraser. Just want to make sure that your paint is dry. So there we are, now ready for some detail. So I think really going to want a big wash of yellow to create this kind of glowing look, this kind of glowing nighttime-y look. So I'm using the Permanent Yellow Deep, which is a very warm yellow, and I'm just going to do a really watered down wash of yellow kind of over everything, I think. So if we look at the picture, everything is kind of glowing. Especially there's lots of kind of yellow on the floor here. Just doing this really softly. I'm going to put some on the girl as well. And now it just really needs some line work, some detail and texture to really bring it all together. Right, these are all dry now, and I've taken the masking fluid off this one, so you can see how it creates the lights around here. Oh, there's one more bit left. There we go. So now I think it's time for putting in the finishing details and having a little bit of fun with mixed media. So looking at all of these lights, they definitely need to feel more glowy. I'm kind of thinking about neo colour. I think I'm going to go for pan pastel because it is just so great for creating a lovely glow, especially when you already have the shape there. We've got the shape of the light, so let's just do all of these. So you get that glow, and then these are cool. They're kind of yellow, but they're kind of red around the edge. So I'm going to have to think about how I'm going to do that. Maybe a little bit of red pencil would be the answer. Not quite sure. Or red pan pastel. Let's see, was that better? Yeah, that's better. So I'm just going to do the edges with this red. Then you get all the nice glow around here. And just putting on a kind of stronger glow with some more pan pastels. And then after all that kind of hazy pan pastels, I think it needs some details to kind of pull it all back. So I'm thinking, do I go pencil or do I go paintbrush over it? I kind of feel like I don't want it to be too fussy looking, so maybe a little bit of neo colour is what I need. Just looking to see if I've got a coloured pencil the same colour as that for finer details. That is indigo blue, quite similar. Just putting in some of these kind of Art Deco details. It's kind of sharpening it up a bit, and I think kind of making it feel quite fun as well. And I'm just doing this very quickly. If you were doing this piece, you'd probably be able to take much more care. I'm just kind of aware of this video getting very long. So. And it would be fun with more time to be able to get into all the amazing Art Deco detail in this image, but I don't know if you can hear that on the video, that meowing. That's next door's cat just hanging out outside my studio. It's not normally as noisy as this. Don't know what's going on with it. Okay, I think I will leave that there. I think that's definitely got the kind of glowy, atmospheric vibe that I would like it to have. I think it just needs a tiny bit more pan pastel. I think I forgot to do these letters. And then kind of glowing from that door. And then this one, which I want to finish up without it all taking too long. So straight in with pan pastels to one thing I don't necessarily like about using masking fluid is it can make all your lines look a bit blobby, which I don't love. So that is one thing. But then using a mixed media that sharpens everything up can counteract that quite nicely. So it's just something to kind of bear in mind, that the masking fluid may change your line quality, which then may change the kind of overall feel of your piece. Just going to keep the little girl really simple. Light blue shorts, but we've got this basis of yellow for her. The t-shirt's kind of light yellow. And then her skin tone needs to be a little bit deeper. But her face is kind of really right in the light. Put that shadow in. And put some more of these little lights in. And I'm thinking I kind of need a bit more depth, so like putting in like a bit of shadow under there, giving this a bit more depth, looking at where the shadows are. And then thinking about putting in line work that's going to pull it together a little bit more. Oh, is that masking fluid that's still on there? Yeah. This bit I put shadow in and it's too dark. It feels the same as the background, which it shouldn't. It shouldn't be transparent. So I'm going to see what I can do if I lighten it with a bit of pan pastel. Not sure if that quite works. I think if I put the kind of red stripes in, then I think it will definitely read as that's better. That kind of, although it's different to the picture, you kind of understand that it is the canopy a bit more. I think, are these maybe they're candy floss. I'm going to do some popcorn. And then candy floss, I feel like it has to be pan pastels. I like all of this just needs tightening up a little bit, just a little bit more definition so it looks a bit more graphic. Putting some shadows in. That's better. Just feels a little bit more illustrative now, I think. Feels more like she's the character in a children's book, and she's at the fair at night time about to go on some kind of adventure. More of the little lights. I wonder if I should put the strings in connecting the lights. Maybe that makes sense. That does kind of make sense. I think we're kind of done. I just need to do her eyes, and I'm going to have to lean right in and get really close to the paper to do her eyes because the scale is tiny. Her head's smaller than my fingernail, so I'm just going to do that now. And in the picture, her eyes, they almost look kind of closed, like she's just contemplating. Just soaking up the magic. There we go. Okay. That is done. I think we are done. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video. It feels like it's been a whirlwind. I've done so many kind of little paintings, but I've had so much fun playing around with different techniques for creating nighttime scenes, whether it's using masking fluid, whether it's putting your dark colours in first, whether it's putting your lighter colours in first and then building dark on top. Lots of different ways to create kind of glow and atmosphere and contrast and nighttime scenes.